Hey everybody, and welcome back to Story Time with Sarah. We are getting pretty close to the end of our first chapter book that we're going through on the channel, and it's called Sideways Stories from Wayside School. If you're brand new, I want to welcome you. I'm really glad that you're here and you're listening to my stories, but I really want you to stop this video where it's at, and I want you to go back to the beginning of this chapter book, find the video with chapter 1 and 2, and work your way through from the beginning. I need you to get to know the characters and the story before you just jump into the middle with us. Can you do that for me? Great. I'll wait right here while you catch up. But for the rest of you that are caught up, welcome back. We're going to jump in. Today is chapters 21 and 22. So if you're ready, come cuddle up because it's story time with Sarah. Chapter 21, Ron. Ron had curly hair and little feet. "I want to play kickball," he said. "You can't play," said Terrence. "Get out of here," said Dee Dee. "Scram," said Jason. "I want to play kickball," said Ron. "Well, you're not playing," said Terrence. "Beat it." Ron stomped across the playground to the hopscotch area. Jenny was playing hopscotch with Lewis. Jenny was on 9 and Lewis was still on 4, but it was his turn. "I want to play kickball," Ron said. "So, go play kickball," said Lewis. "Terrence won't let me play," said Ron. Lewis walked with Ron to the kickball field. "Hey, what about our hopscotch game?" Jenny asked. "You won," said Lewis. "I just beat Lewis in hopscotch," Jenny announced. Leslie, Rondi, and Allison flocked around her. "Hey, Lewis," Damien shouted. "Do you want to play kickball?" "All right," said Lewis. "Ron and I will both play." "No," said Terrence. "Ron isn't playing." "Anyone who wants to play can play," said Lewis. "No, he can't," said Terrence. "It's my ball." "It's not your ball," said Lewis. "You gave it to me," said Terrence. "I gave it to you to share," said Lewis. "And if you can't share, you can't have it." "Oh, all right," said Terrence, "but I get to pitch." "Ron and I will stand everybody," Lewis announced. "All right," said Jason. "We'll kill him." "We'll murder him," said Dee Dee. "We'll smash him," said Myron. "We'll see," said Lewis. Ron pitched, and Lewis played the other 8 positions. 20 minutes later, they finally got 3 outs. The score was 21-0. Ron was up first. "Infield in," shouted Damien. Everybody stood within 10 feet of home plate. "All right, Ron," Lewis shouted. "Kick it over their heads." Ron kicked the ball only 3.5 feet. Todd picked it up and threw him out. Lewis was up. Everybody ran to the back edge of the outfield. Still, Lewis kicked the ball over their heads for a home run. Everybody ran all the way back in again for Ron's up. He kicked the ball only 2 feet. Dee Dee tagged him out. Lewis kicked another home run. Ron then kicked the ball a foot and tripped over it on his way to first base. 3 outs. Ron and Lewis held the other team to only 5 runs the next inning. And that was because the bell rang. Lunch was finally over. Lewis and Ron lost 26-2. Ron had had a wonderful time. The next day, Ron said, "I want to play kickball." "You can't play," said Terrence. "Get out of here," said Jason. "Scram," said Dee Dee. "I want to play kickball," Ron told Lewis. Lewis walked with him to the kickball field. "Ron and I will stand all of you." Everybody liked the teams. Ron pitched while Lewis played the 8 other positions. They lost 57-2. After the game, Lewis took Ron aside. "Listen, Ron," he said, "why do you always want to play kickball? You can't kick, and you can't field. You can't even run to first base. You get smashed every time." "Hey now, wait a second," said Ron. "Don't go blaming it all on me. You're half the team too, you know." And with that, he punched Lewis in the stomach. And he punched a heck of a lot harder than he kicked. Chapter 22, The 3 Erics. In Mrs. Jewell's class, there were 3 children named Eric. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Ovens. They were known throughout the school for being fat. Eric Fry sat on this end of the room, and Eric Bacon sat in the middle of the room, and Eric Ovens sat at that end of the room. There was a joke around Wayside School that if all 3 Erics were ever in the same end of the room at the same time, the whole school would tip over. Eric Bacon hated jokes like that. That's not surprising. After all, he wasn't even fat. In fact, he was the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewell's class. But nobody seemed to notice. The other two Erics were fat, and so everyone just thought that all Erics were fat. But I'm not fat, Eric Bacon insisted. What's your name? Asked Jason. Eric, said Eric Bacon. Then you're fat, Jason concluded. And pretty soon, skinny little Eric Bacon, the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewell's class, had the nickname Fatso. Eric Fry really was fat. He was also the best athlete in Mrs. Jewell's class. His body was solid muscle. However, nobody ever noticed. The other two Erics weren't very good at sports. Eric Ovens was clumsy, and Eric Fatso Bacon was a good athlete for his size, but because he was so skinny, he didn't have much power. So naturally, everybody just assumed that Eric Fry was also clumsy and weak. After all, his name was Eric. When the other kids chose up teams, Eric Fry was the last one picked. They never noticed his home runs or the fabulous catches he made. Like all great athletes, he made the impossible look easy. Of course, the other kids did notice the one time that he dropped the ball. Eric Fry was playing right field. Terrence belted a deep fly to left. Eric Fry raced all the way across the field after the ball and at the last second dived at it. He caught it in midair on his fingertips. But just as he hit the ground, the ball squirted loose. Well, what do you expect from Butterfingers, said Stephen. And since that time, Eric Fry has had the nickname Butterfingers. Eric Ovens was the nicest person in Mrs. Jewell's class. He treated everyone equally and always had a kind word to say. But because his name was Eric, everyone thought he was mean. Fatso was mean because everyone called him Fatso. Butterfingers was mean just because he always had to play right field. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Ovens was also mean. They called him Crabapple. Good morning, Allison, said Eric Ovens. How are you? Lay off, Crabapple, will ya? Answered Allison. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. All three of the Erics had nicknames. It was better that way. Otherwise, when someone said, Hey, Eric, no one knew to whom he was talking. One time, all the Erics would answer, and the next time, none of them would answer. But when someone said, Hey, Crabapple, then Eric Ovens knew they were talking to him. And if someone said, Hey, Butterfingers, Eric Fry knew that they meant him. And when someone said, Hey, Fatso, Eric Bacon knew that he was being called. Well, those are our 2 chapters for today. And I just want to add on the end of that last chapter that it's never nice to call anyone names other than the name that their parents gave them. Unless it's like a fun nickname, like my name is Sarah, but my mom calls me Bat or Bat Boo or a variety of other names. And my sister calls me Sammy. Those are fun nicknames. But calling somebody Butterfingers or Fatso or Crabapple, those aren't nice nicknames to give to somebody. It's kind of like, who said in here? I think it was Allison. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I think that's a really important lesson. I don't normally talk about the chapters after I finish reading them, but that one was a little bit of a harder chapter to read to you guys, just because the students in the class were really being mean to all 3 of the Erics. So if you got someone in your class that the other kids are calling him or her a name, why don't you be their friend instead? Because I guarantee that they'll like you a lot more than the other students that are being mean to them. Hope you guys enjoyed the chapters today. Go out there and be a friend to someone else. See you next time. Bye.